Welcome to Cleveland Conversations. I'm your host, Ed Horowitz. Generally, when we notice our serious safety or health-related problems in society, we do everything in our power to correct it. Think about our food. When manufacturers discover that food has become tainted with salmonella, a dangerous bacteria that can cause severe illness and even death, the food items are recalled and taken off the shelves to keep us all safe. But here in Cleveland, we're facing a health crisis that is affecting our most vulnerable citizens, our children. Each year, thousands of small children are poisoned by lead paint in their own homes. Recent studies have found that approximately 25% of kindergartners in Cleveland schools have some degree of lead poisoning. In many ways, this is a stealth attack on their developing minds and bodies, since the effects of lead poisoning, which have dangerous ramifications for physical and mental development, often don't appear until years later. In 2019, the City of Cleveland passed legislation to address the problem of lead paint in homes. But according to our guest today, we're doing a poor job of solving this problem. And with that, let me introduce our guest. Robert Fischer is an associate professor at the Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences at Case Western Reserve University. Since 2007, he has served as co-director of the Center on Urban Poverty and Community Development in the Mandel School, and he leads a range of research studies there. Professor Fischer is also faculty chair of the Master of Nonprofit Organizations at the Mandel School, and he teaches courses in evaluation methods, data, and program design. And most importantly for our purposes today, Professor Fischer is a lead-safe auditor for the City of Cleveland, overseeing much of the work the city does in solving the problem of lead poisoning. Welcome to Cleveland Conversations, Professor Fischer.
Thank you, Ed. I appreciate the invitation.
So we've had this problem going on for a long time. Tell me about the state of it currently. Where do you see us being in solving this problem?
Well, I think in your intro you addressed this a bit, and it continues to be a public health crisis with a housing solution, and that is a complicating factor. It's no one size fits all for the emanation of this problem in housing. Our current levels of lead exposure have continued to decline, as they have for now over 20 years based on annual testing data, but we still know that a large number of children, 1,000 last year, were testing above the lead alert standard that's in place. So it continues to be a serious problem, and the figure you cited, the 25%, that's kind of looking over time for children before they reach kindergarten. And at that time, we reported 25%. If you use the current standard, it's actually 37% of kids.
That's going from 1/4 to over 1/3. That's
Yes.
a lot of children.
Yes.
So if parents are watching this right now, what should they be concerned about? Why should they be concerned that their children are having lead in their bodies? What are some of the effects of that on them?
Yeah. So if you think about, we have a loving history with lead in this country. It was a miracle product. It was put in many different
gasoline,
consumer products for various reasons, and it was included in paint in houses because it provides a nice glossy sheen. It goes on smoothly, and so all our housing that was built prior to 1978, when they outlawed paint in lead, all of those houses have this as part of their feature, unless they've been completely renovated. So it's there. Parents need to know that the issue is not that it's there, it's that it emerges for children to experience it. So it comes from any friction point in the house, think windows, doors, floors, and then outside the house, paint that may have sloughed off over the years into the dirt around the house. So any of those surfaces become a point where a child could pick up dust, and then the reason it's a child issue is because they're much more likely to put their hands in their mouth.
So they're touching things. If there's any type of chipped paint in the home, or if that chipped paint falls and becomes dusty, they're going to be inhaling it.
Yes.
And as you said, doors and windows seem to be the problem because they're older windows. Maybe the windows haven't been replaced for 20, 30 years. Opening, closing, that is getting sloughed off.
That's
and
right.
It's coming into contact with the children. So, but for adults, it's not so much of a problem because our brains are more are fully developed at this point, so the lead, that kind of breathing in it and experiencing that isn't so much of an issue?
Well, if it's lead dust, unless it becomes airborne, adults are not going to be putting their hands in their mouth in the same way.
All right.
But yes, developmentally, it's much more of a serious matter for children.
Can you talk more in detail about how it affects children?
Yeah, we have several decades of research
Sure.
on this now that have connected lead exposure to a variety of both early childhood and later into adolescence problematic behaviors. So we know that it affects the frontal lobe, affects decision making, control, a whole variety of affect issues. So as you think as a child...
By affect, you mean emotional issues?
Yes.
Okay.
So, for many of these children, once they get to school and they display these behaviors, they're problematic behaviors that are going to get that child into a track educationally that's more likely to be in a special needs track, special education, and possibly behavior issues.
Because I think when children are identified as being problematic in a classroom, it's considered a behavioral issue, not a biological issue that they have, that they've been poisoned by lead. And so the ramifications are, punishment or detention or expulsion, even when maybe a blood test would show they have lead poisoning, that's causing these problems. We need to address this in a different way.
Right. You're not looking for what caused this behavior. You're looking for what's the response to this behavior a lot of times.
Before we get into the issues with the City of Cleveland, while we're talking about children, how are the Cleveland Metropolitan School District thinking about this issue, considering it? They've been aware of problems with lead in some of the water. I know previous years there have been some schools that have been closed, water fountains have been shut down, lead has been found in the pipes. So they know that lead is an issue with the water, but what about with children? Are they considering this as a major problem for them?
When we released our earlier study on the prevalence of lead in children as they were arriving at kindergarten, I think, and we pointed out that in some schools, the proportion of the kindergarten class that had lead histories was now 40 to 50%. So now it changes from what do you do for a few children to how do you teach a class where a big number of the kids have this as an issue. And so they've done a series of trainings with teachers about what they can do, what accommodations they can make in classrooms, giving freedom of movement, color schemes, a whole variety of things to enhance the educational process.
Okay, so we have this issue. So we know this is a problem. We know that there are terrible effects on it, and it has ramifications for how children are in the classroom, and then going on further. So let's talk about the problem in.
Can I add one?
Please do.
I want to add one thing because
Okay.
A lot of times in Cleveland we hear things like, "Well, that's national research. Is it really true for Cleveland's kids?" So we've done that work here in Cleveland, following cohorts of Cleveland children all the way up to age 21 using administrative records and matching those to kids from the same neighborhoods with similar characteristics. And we found, looking at things like juvenile justice involvement, homeless shelter services, adult jail, educational outcomes, kids that had these lead events in early childhood are underperforming their peers who were not lead exposed by 20 to 30% on almost all these metrics that we can measure for them. So it's true in Cleveland. And if you just think about socially what that means, we are paying the costs for this civically in all these other systems that these kids are going to encounter along their trajectory of life. So to say that, you will often hear it's too expensive to fix lead. Well, we're already paying a dramatic amount downstream for the outcomes of lead.
Right.
So I think we need to maybe pivot on that thought process.
I think that's a crucial point, because we're always concerned about Cleveland safety director and police department and crime, but if we can see this trend, we're going to see it starts at an early age, and then it's going to be a problem later. It's a great, super important point. Let's talk about the housing and what happened in 2019. Cleveland decided to address this problem in a serious way, even though it's sort of, as you say, it's been known it's going on for decades. 2019 legislation has passed. Explain to our viewers how it started from there and where we are right now.
So, as you say, there have been coalitions working on this prior to 2019. What changed, I think, at that time was a renewed commitment, not just in the public sector, but also in the foundation community and the nonprofit community, that we all needed to come together around this issue. And the Lead Safe Cleveland Coalition formed in 2019, and one of their first agenda items was to push for a new ordinance on rental housing in the city of Cleveland. And I think it surprised everyone that it actually was passed so quickly. But you know how those things go.
Sure.
All the stars aligned, and in the middle of that year it
So
was passed.
rental housing in Cleveland is old. It's been built, a lot of it before 1978. So we know that it has that paint, and maybe it hasn't been updated for many years, or that paint is underneath new paint. It can still chip away. So they want to address it in those homes. So what was their plan to address it?
Yes. So critically, this ordinance only pertains to rental housing. So it's premised on the idea that, as you mentioned with food, there's a transaction here where property owners are selling a product to renters, and the city is trying to protect the quality of that product that is being sold, essentially.
Right.
So you'll hear criticisms that it doesn't apply to owned, if you live in an owned home. I mean, obviously, lead anywhere is of concern to us, but the first movement on this was on rental housing. And by the studies that we've done at our center, we have looked at the landscape of rental housing in Cleveland. By our estimates, we have about 100,000 units, think apartments, of rental housing in about 56,000 properties, buildings. So this is a huge expanse, diversified,
Right.
owned by something like 36,000 owners of those properties.
Okay.
So some own multiple properties, but the vast majority own really a single property. So it's a very diffuse system of ownership, and the ordinance tries to go after the fact, basically the idea that in order to be a rental property, you need to have a lead safe certificate in place. And that means your property has been tested, it has been certified as lead safe for children to live there.
Okay. And so it's incumbent upon the owners of the properties to go about and get this certification, right?
That's correct.
And what if you're in a property right now, who's people who are watching today's broadcast, right, and thinking, okay, this home, this apartment is very old. I wonder if there is lead paint here. Do I need to contact my landlord? And if they don't respond, do I take a second step? Should I go get a test that I might buy at Walmart or another store that I can, swab my paint and see if it's lead paint there? What's the best route that people should do to protect their children, and consider that?
I think it starts with what your relationship is with your landlord. If you have a good working relationship, then this is something I think you push for. I mean, that we've heard from tenants across the city that they're scared to bring this up. They
Right.
don't want to rock the boat. Maybe
Sure.
they have a relationship issue, they have past problems, they don't want to get evicted, all of those sorts of things. They don't want the rent to go up. I think I would encourage them to first reach out to the Lead Safe Resource Center, which can better direct them on what to do as far as motivating their owner around this matter. I would not encourage them to try to get a test, because this really needs to be done by a lead inspector. A more holistic exam needs to be done to really look at all the parts, not just one windowsill, but
The whole home.
They look at the whole home.
Inside, outside,
Yes,
everything.
right.
And it's about 1/3 of, so far we're at about 1/3 of owners have gotten this done?
So far, nearly a third of the units have been lead
Okay.
safe
All right.
certified. So
Okay, not
nearly
owners.
30,000 of the 100,000.
Okay. And the goal was that by 2028 we would reach 100%, right? And we're 4 years away, and based on the number of people who are applying for applications to get it done, it looks like we are far from going to reach that goal, right? That's
Yeah.
what your report is. That's what your recent report is saying.
Yeah. That's
not good.
And the part that we didn't lift up there is these are 2-year lead safe certificates for the most part.
So they last for 2 years, and you need to get it
Then
recertified
you're going to get it
again.
renewed.
And the ones who've gotten it in the early days, less than about 20% of those have only
That's
got it
right.
renewed. So people are not interested in doing
1
this.
in 5 are renewing.
Is it expensive for the owners of the proproperties to get done?
Well, you can get a rebate for having done the lead safe.
Okay, but you have to
pursued it.
and
You have
how-
to, you
but
have to go out
put
of
it out
pocket
first.
$750
Okay.
to get this done, and then you can get a rebate.
Right.
But if you think about that's if you have a pretty good property and it just needs maybe a cleaning.
Okay.
But if you have serious issues, you need new windows.
So who's paying for that?
Then, well, they can go through there's a loans and grants program that's available. That is the one thing that is distinctive about Cleveland's approach, is they really saw that other communities that did not provide funding couldn't get where they wanted to go.
Right.
So here they put together this nearly $100 million Lead Safe Home Fund to support those owners on those greater expense items.
Okay, so it's because it can be expensive, and owners, if you're a mom and pop owner of one or two rentals, you're probably just maybe squeezing by on those rentals.
Exactly.
You're not, or if the tenant isn't paying on time. I mean, there's lots of ramifications here in terms of where that cash flow is going to suddenly be available to take care of this problem.
Right.
Is there a penalty if you don't? Does the city come after you, or how are they keeping track? They don't have a registry for every rental, do they?
Well, that's the first thing I would point out is maybe 30% of these rentals are actually registered as rentals. So there's a bunch of fugitive rentals that are operating, with tenants, but they have never actually registered with the city. So that's a problem, because now the city can't really effectively communicate with those owners,
right?
Because they haven't even complied with the first thing, which is the registration.
Okay. So other cities have tried this. We've modeled ourselves after the city of Rochester, New York, right?
In a way.
In a way, how successful is Rochester, or maybe Providence, Rhode Island, or Detroit? How successful have they been in similar efforts?
Well, I think that's where there's context matters, and though we have a goal of kind of complete compliance by 2028, the comparison cities we have outperformed them on all the metrics that we can see. So we're ahead of the peers,
even though we're behind.
We have more audacious goals
than
these other cities seem to have set.
So what do you think can turn this around, right? What is needed? I know at a recent hearing, there's been complaints that there's just not enough inspectors available, right? Even if suddenly 1,000 homeowners or landlords would say, I want to have it inspected, the inspectors are just not there. Is that where the problem is?
We have a lot of inspectors. These are all private market, independent inspectors who are out there working, and there's probably about 30 that are on a vetted list that are provided by the Lead Safe Resource Center.
30 is not a lot for 156,000 units.
No, but in total we have like 150 folks who are on the list, but a lot of them only do a handful of inspections. So there's just maybe 10 or 12 that are doing the lion's share of inspections. So to make a business of this, you have to have reliable cash flow.
Sure.
You have to be able to do these tests and then get the rebates flowing, and that's proven to be a bit of a headache for some of these inspectors who are really all in on doing a lot of inspections. So I think it's partly that we need more inspectors, but we need more demand from owners in order to show inspectors that they could make this a workable business for themselves.
Do you see this as the county takes a very good job of marking everyone's property, assessing your tax rate. They know where every property is and who needs to pay taxes. Is it a problem with the city of Cleveland that they don't know who owns all of these properties? Is it a county city issue that if someone else took it over, it would be done better?
Well, no, they know who owns them.
They know who owns?
But they don't know whether it's necessarily a rental.
Okay.
If they have not registered.
I see.
So in our study that we did, we looked for markers that properties were actually operating as rentals from the public records, and that's how we came up with this estimate of 100,000 units. So
as the lead auditor, your official title, what is that? What is your capacity in that?
So under the ordinance that was passed in 2019, it required the launch of a lead safe auditor. And because we had been working for the previous 10 years with housing data and with lead testing data from children, we were approached.
And is it the Poverty Center?
This is the Poverty Center, yes.
Okay.
So we were very familiar with the underlying data. We'd done very comparable research. So we were brought on at that time to serve in this auditor role. So we're external, independent, we receive data regularly from the City Division of Building and Housing. We process it and we report quarterly back to the Lead Safe Advisory Board, which was also created by the legislation.
Right. And Mayor Bibb originally said that he was going to appoint some sort of like a lead czar to like oversee that. Is that ever happen?
He did appoint that lead czar, and subsequently her position transitioned into Building and Housing. So it was reporting directly to the mayor, I believe, and that now it's part of Building and Housing. And then there's another senior administration official who's serving in a role similar to that now, trying to work across the departments of the city. So Building and Housing, Community Development, Public Health all have a piece of this work.
Okay, and so your work, we just have a few minutes left. So, so the Poverty Center, you were looking at these, and your background. Did you ever do anything with lead or with these kind of issues before you were asked to do it? Well, besides looking at at issues with childhood, of course, this is one of the issues with childhood, but not maybe the top one.
Well, the interesting thing is me personally, I've been working on early childhood development and services since around 2000 here in Cleveland. So we've been studying high quality preschool effects, home visiting programs, medical home services, a whole variety of things. And in all of those discussions, lead was always mentioned, but the data lived in the blind. It was not accessible. It went to the County Board of Health, but they had no ability to share those data. So the thing that changed prior to 2019 was that my center successfully received a data use agreement from the Ohio Department of Health to receive identifiable lead testing data on children in our county. And so we were now able to do a lead overlay to see how many children in these different programs were exposed to lead previously, how many of them, over their lifetime, how many of them had multiple tests, and what can we learn from that. So it really was a breakthrough in being able to see the full picture. So lead is both a dependent variable, an outcome, lead poisoning, but it's also an explanatory factor for lots of other circumstances that we were already studying.
So your recent at the recent meeting of the Lead Safe Coalition, there's this discussion. You presented these findings. It's June of 2024. Where do you see this change is going to happen? Where do you see things going, in the near future? How can we reach this goal? How can we encourage more landlords to participate and get this problem fixed?
Well, I'd say there's two things we have not seen the full value of yet. One is the value of the private market here for housing, because there's no way for you as a renter to know that your property is lead safe compliant, or if you're looking to move, how do you know that you want to prefer properties that have this certificate? Right now there's no way for you to easily see which property. So there's no reward for being lead safe certified if you're the owner of that property, unless you proclaim it in some way. So power of the market is one, and the other is the power of the stick, which I mentioned the loans and grants. That's kind of the
that's the carrot.
That's the carrot. The stick is the ticketing, the penalties for noncompliance. And earlier this year, when the city passed the Residents First legislation, included in that was the ability to use civil ticketing for noncompliance with the lead safe certificate. Prior to that, it required a criminal hearing and a judicial process. Now it can just be ticket writing. So it's much quicker, and the city is moving forward with a plan to how to execute, because obviously that's a lot of properties.
That's a lot of properties, right? So and you need that enforcement, otherwise people aren't.
You have to signal that this matters.
That this matters, right? So so hopefully as we go forward, one more time for our viewers watching it. So that you recommend that they talk to their landlord as a first step. What websites can they go to that you would recommend would be the best place for some more information about this?
So the Lead Safe Cleveland Coalition has a website with pretty much, whether you're a property owner, a tenant, interested in being part of the lead safe workforce, you can go there and get information. For those that are tenants, I'd encourage them to call the Lead Safe Resource Center, and I'm sorry I don't know the number off the top of my head, but yeah. So Lead Safe Coalition website has a direct link to to that resource center.
Okay, so the Lead Safe Coalition website is the best place for you to start with to get more information about this, follow up. If you feel like you're living in housing that is, perhaps run down or built before 1978, or you have any concerns about lead paint in your home, talk to your landlord. Take that step so you can keep your children safe and the children in your neighborhood safe and your housing, because that dust blows everywhere and it can be a serious problem. Rob Fischer, thank you so much for being with us today on Cleveland Conversations. I'm Ed Horowitz. We'll see you next time on Cleveland Conversations.